The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom haters, backtrackers, skeptics, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter at this point. They keep making the same mistake, and I don't know why they keep making the same mistake. And it's not just the same mistake with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, but the same mistake with Nintendo Switch when it comes to the sales of the games, the marketing, what Nintendo's doing. Listen, no company's perfect. I'm definitely not trying to say Nintendo is. They've made their fair share of mistakes. We can talk about the Super Mario 3D All-Stars debacle. We can talk about a bunch of other things when it comes to the Nintendo Switch system itself, messaging, whatever the case is. I agree with you guys. It's all there. We all know that. But when it comes to actually selling games, Nintendo has been almost impeccable with that record. Like pretty much every single game, if you go back and look at it, has done better than its previous iteration. It's very rare to see a major game launch on the Nintendo Switch in one of Nintendo's franchises or something that they do new, and it not have a large amount of success, even beating out what it did previously, whether it was a previous Nintendo system on the Wii or the Wii U or the Nintendo 3DS, or even on the same system itself. So now what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, no shots at RGT by the way, what's coming up here. I did watch this video though. People think that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom won't outsell Breath of the Wild because of X, Y, and Z. Now, I've discussed this before, but now we have even more data and I have even more sources when it comes to what this game is doing beforehand. And I think that people are going to be in for a rude awakening once again, once Nintendo reveals those launch sales. So let's get into it here. The mistakes here, guys. First, Tears of the Kingdom is the same as Breath of the Wild, right? That was a mistake that people said. Obviously, the game is going to be far different than that. Then Tears of the Kingdom isn't worth $70. Now, this is subjective. You can still feel that it's not worth $70, but I think that what they've shown off so far here definitely is going to give you $70 worth of content when it comes to replayability and when it comes to the size of the game. I mean, it looks incredible. Now we have the sales thing where people are saying, multiple people, it's not just content creators, but people in the chat, there's people that I've talked to, there's people on Twitter, like you can see it all over the place. So I'm not going to link anything when it comes down to it, but it's out there. There are many people who feel that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom can't reach the heights of the 29 million plus that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild has sold so far. Have we learned nothing from the Nintendo Switch at this point? Let's take a look at all Nintendo's major sequels. So let's talk small scale first, right? Smaller scale. Look at a game like Bayonetta 2 to Bayonetta 3. Bayonetta 3 on the Nintendo Switch is the fastest selling Bayonetta game of all time. It's the fastest selling. It's already over 1 million units. It did that like in a month. Now, Bayonetta is small scale compared to Nintendo's bigger franchises, but at the same time, it still shows that there was large growth in terms of initial sales from Bayonetta 2 on the Nintendo Switch to Bayonetta 3. Now, let's take another look. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 to Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Now, what we know, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is still the best selling right now, but Xenoblade Chronicles 3 launched at the fastest selling Xenoblade game with over 1.8 million plus units in that first number of months. So it's already off to a hotter start. So the launch initial sales, and I think ultimately, especially with the DLC coming, it could absolutely catch or surpass Xenoblade Chronicles 2 with what they do going forward in the next system as well. Now let's get to the actual real comparisons, the ones that we should be looking at, because we're talking about Nintendo's big boys, the major franchises, and more importantly, we're talking about games that already have major iterations on the Nintendo Switch and launched a bit earlier. So earlier in the life, within the first year or within the first couple of years of the Switch. So that's what we should really focus on. What are the big titles that have sequels on the Nintendo Switch that launched at the beginning of the system compared to launching at the end of the system's life or at this point? And there are two games that we can really hone in on. And that's one, Splatoon, that franchise, Splatoon 2 to Splatoon 3, and 2, Pokemon Sword and Shield to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Now remember, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild has outsold every single Pokemon and also every single Splatoon game on the Nintendo Switch at this point. Now, collectively, obviously Pokemon is more popular, but right now, 29 million units, that is more than any other individual release of a Pokemon game or a Splatoon game on the Nintendo Switch. So right now, it's outsold it. So that's what we know about Breath of the Wild. So the franchise, the popularity of Zelda is at an all-time high. But we need to compare these. These are probably the best examples to use. Now, if you look at Splatoon, for example, that game, Splatoon 2, that took the whole generation. It came out in 2017, that same launch year of the Nintendo Switch, took the whole generation, sold about 12 million units plus so far at this point. Splatoon 3 launches, and there were people saying the exact same thing. Oh, it's not going to sell as well. You know, it took the whole generation to hit 10 million, 12 million. And then what did Splatoon 3 do? It jumped out to 10 million units plus in the first 3 months, pretty much selling 90% of what Splatoon 2 did in the first number of months on the market. So what does that tell you? What's the analysis on that? Well, big sequel that upgrades it in every single way, and that's way better. And you have a bigger install base for initial big sales and also continued sales as well, because the install base is just larger. Now the next game, Pokemon Sword and Shield to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. This is the one where people felt that Pokemon Sword and Shield was going to outsell Pokemon Scarlet and Violet because of the issues Pokemon Scarlet and Violet had. Well, the first 3 days, the game sold 10 million units, having a Nintendo record, and then it went on to sell 20 million units in the first month and a half. So that's pretty much the amount that Pokemon Sword and Shield has done. It's not that far away. I think Pokemon Sword and Shield is around 25, 26 million units. So it pretty much did almost all of that within the first month and a half in its release. And that doesn't even count January, February, March, April, going into May now at this point, right? Doesn't count everything. These sales are as of last year, Nintendo's last financial briefing. So these sales are a bit dated, but it's what we've got so far. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at two games that are set in the same scale, or the same, I would say, parameters or variables that we have with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild to The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Major franchises, 10 million plus unit sellers, right? Big franchises that have done really well, but then also launched within the first year or so of the Switch's launch, and now launched later, within 5 years later or 6 years later after the first game. With the exception of Pokemon Sword and Shield, that was a little bit shorter time period, 2019 to 2022. So you got about 3-4 years or so there. But it's still really relevant here because it's a major franchise, one of the biggest that Nintendo has, one of the best selling. So it's really good to compare and see what the market did at this point. And if you're looking at it from that, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is set to have a massive launch, and it can probably reach upwards of 15 to 20 million within that first month and a half or so. If we go off the popularity of what we've seen, if you put it right in between Splatoon 3 and also Pokemon in popularity or potential, it's right in between there. It can definitely hit that. And let's talk about the actual facts when it comes to Tears of the Kingdom pre-orders. It's blowing out Breath of the Wild. Obviously, Breath of the Wild was a launch title, so it had to build up with the Nintendo Switch. There's not as many people that have it. People didn't care about the Wii U version. Tears of the Kingdom is clearly going to blow it out in that respect. However, it's on track to actually outsell at launch every single other Japanese Zelda game. That includes Ocarina of Time, which is the highest with over 350,000 units in its first launch week. Now, the COMG pre-orders put it above other mega hit IPs. So, for example, Super Smash Bros. And Splatoon 3, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has more pre-orders with the COMG in Japan with multiple retail chains. Now, another big thing here that we have to consider, guys, this is probably the most important thing with this when it comes to how the game is going to do. Quality of the game with the install base. The quality of this game, Tears of the Kingdom, it's probably going to be a 90 plus rated game, probably 94 to 97, somewhere in that range. It's going to be right up there with some of the best reviewed games of all time. But if you look at it when it comes to Nintendo Switch, we haven't had a major first party release that's a 90 plus rated game in 3 years. The last time that I remember, it is Animal Crossing New Horizons with its 90 plus average. That is the last time that we've gotten any game that's been a 90 or so. And we saw what happened with Animal Crossing New Horizons. Obviously, COVID, you have the pandemic, people inside a lot, so it definitely blew some sales up there. But at the same time, nobody expected Animal Crossing New Horizons to sell what it sold. But that massive install base, the great review scores, and the hype of the Nintendo Switch and the games that are coming at that time just blew it up. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has more hype than Animal Crossing at this point. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is probably going to review higher, and it also has more pre-orders, plus it can do better in multiple reasons. So if you look at it pretty much any way at this point, you look at the Amazon pre-orders, you look at the COMG. Also, I have a few sources myself with retail chains here. You look at any pre-order chart, you look at what's going on. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is set for a monster launch. I wouldn't be surprised, once again, if we saw 15 to 20 million units within that first month or so, and at least 10 million units or so within that first week, 2 weeks. So it's tracking to be that high. So when I see people say, oh, it's not going to outsell Breath of the Wild, or it's going to be close or something, I'm looking at it like, maybe that could be the case, but I don't think we learned from the past when it comes to what Nintendo's already put out, specifically comparing to Splatoon 2 to Splatoon 3, because I heard people say the same thing, and also Pokemon Sword and Shield to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. You've got to factor in what's been happening and the most recent blockbuster games Nintendo's had with their big franchises. And this game, quality-wise, beats out Splatoon 3. It's going to beat it out when it comes to review scores, and definitely is going to beat out Pokemon Scarlet and Violet when it comes to that. And once again, Breath of the Wild was one of the most popular games on the Nintendo Switch. It sits right there at 4th place on the top 10 all-time Nintendo Switch sales. So you're going to have a lot of fans and also new people joining in this time around from the launch or very shortly after launch. And it's also a great time period to release. Summer, kids getting out of school, all this good stuff happening when it comes to more time to play games. I think that people are going to be taking vacations and stuff, have Tears of the Kingdom to play. So I think overall, everything is really just shaping up for Tears of the Kingdom to be a massive hit and outsell Breath of the Wild. Now, another thing that we have to factor in here, guys, the next system's coming, and I think that you'll be able to play Tears of the Kingdom on that next system. It's definitely going to be on there through backwards compatibility, through a patch, whatever the case is. You're going to be able to play it on there. The next Zelda game is not going to be ready right away since this one took so long. So you're going to have a lot of people playing Tears of the Kingdom and buying it on the next Switch whenever that comes out. Whether it's later this year, which I don't think it will be. I think it'll be announced maybe, or maybe 2024, whatever the case is, whenever they decide to release it, there's going to be Tears of the Kingdom on there and people playing and buying it on there. So you're going to have a lot more people that are going to be interested in it, especially if Nintendo does a patch to up the frame rate and resolution and make the game better. You're absolutely going to see even more people gravitate towards it. So to me, I think it's a slam dunk that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom outdoes The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild based on what we've seen before with the sales and the history with the most recent blockbuster Nintendo Switch games, just as early as last year with Splatoon 3 and also with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below, and make sure you check out my previous videos on The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, in addition to how things are getting a bit out of hand and how some AAA developers had some interesting things to say about the game. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you for the next one. Peace.